He stepped off the transport platform, expecting the usual tension of a high-stakes extraction mission, the kind where laser blasts ricochet and alarms scream in every direction. Instead, he was greeted by a landscape that seemed to glow with a soft, bioluminescent haze, casting the alien structures in an almost dreamlike shimmer. He adjusted his visor nervously, double-checking his gear, and muttered under his breath about the briefing having been a little vague. Somewhere deep inside, his gut twisted, not from danger, at least not yet, but from the fact that this mission already felt absurdly beautiful. The chamber ahead opened like a flower, revealing a platform floating above a translucent pool of glowing liquid. At first, he thought he saw a hologram, because the figure standing there was impossibly elegant, radiant even, her form framed by the gentle light in a way that made him forget to breathe. He froze, hands clenching the straps of his gear. This was supposed to be a tactical mission. Tactical. And yet, the alien before him tilted her head, blinking with eyes that were almost too bright to look at directly, and smiled in a way that seemed both mischievous and mildly mocking. "Welcome," she said, voice melodious and teasing at the same time. The sound wrapped around him like a physical presence, warm and unnerving. He cleared his throat, trying to muster authority. I'm here to extract you. For, the mission." His voice cracked. She floated a little closer, hovering over the pool with effortless grace, her fingers trailing through the liquid, sending ripples that glowed with every color imaginable. "Extraction," she said, tilting her head again, eyes sparkling. "Yes, I suppose that is the purpose of your visit. But tell me, are you prepared for the bonding?" The words hit him like a ton of bricks. He stared. "Bonding? Bonding?" He swallowed, feeling his face heat up in ways he hadn't felt since, well, ever. He didn't know if she meant the diplomatic kind, the chemical kind, or something entirely outside human comprehension. Bonding is part of extraction." His voice wavered somewhere between hope and sheer terror. She giggled, a light, musical sound that made him twitch instinctively. "Of course," she said. "It is traditional. Essential. But don't worry. I will guide you." She leaned back, giving him a playful wink, and then vanished. Just like that. The sudden absence made him stumble forward, one boot slipping on the smooth floor, arms flailing as he tried to regain balance. A stray tool clattered into the glowing pool, sending waves that licked the edges of the platform. He cursed under his breath, realizing he'd have to fish it out later, though the alien's laughter echoed from somewhere, playful and teasing, making him flush brighter than any emergency signal could. He spun around, searching for her, only to find her floating right behind him, hands lightly on his shoulders in a ghostly touch that made his heart hammer. "You must be careful," she whispered, leaning close enough that the scent, or whatever alien equivalent of scent it was, made his head swim. He coughed, stepping back awkwardly, bumping into a hovering console, which beeped indignantly. I can handle myself," he managed to say, though his voice sounded more like a squeak. "Can you?" she teased, twirling in the air with a flick of her wrist, disappearing and reappearing multiple times, her laughter bouncing off the walls like musical chimes. "This is only the beginning." He tried to focus on his training, the tactical protocols he'd drilled 1,000 times in simulations. Steady breathing. Assess the environment. Plan the extraction. But all of it fell apart the moment she appeared again, stepping onto the platform with a casual elegance that suggested she could have walked on solid ground or air or liquid, it didn't matter, really, and smiled. The smile had a mischievous curl, as if she knew exactly how flustered he was and wanted to push it further. "I should warn you," she said lightly, floating just out of reach. "The bonding rituals are not for the faint-hearted." He blinked rapidly. "Rituals?" "Yes. Rituals," she said, tilting her head, her eyes sparkling. "They are complicated. And, well, delicate." He cleared his throat, trying to sound composed. I've handled delicate situations before." He wasn't sure if he was convincing himself or her. She giggled again, disappearing mid-sentence and reappearing on the far side of the platform, where she dipped a hand into the glowing pool and sent waves rolling toward him. He jumped back, narrowly avoiding being drenched, and cursed again, muttering about slippery floors and alien liquids. She laughed so brightly it echoed in the chamber, a sound almost musical, teasing him mercilessly. He straightened, trying to regain composure, though his mind raced with questions. How literal was this bonding? How dangerous was she really? And most importantly, how was he supposed to extract her without making a fool of himself in front of the most stunning alien he'd ever seen? Before he could answer any of that, she was back, hovering inches from him with a teasing smile. "Perhaps we should begin the preparation," she said. "Or are you too nervous?" He choked on his own words, clearing his throat furiously. I can do this." "Preparation." "Yes. Preparation is good." He felt his hands shake as he tried to adjust the straps on his suit, avoiding looking directly at her glowing eyes. She tilted her head, eyes sparkling with amusement. "Good. Very good. You'll need every ounce of courage." She vanished again, leaving him muttering and pacing in a haze of confusion and desire, only to reappear a moment later behind him, lightly tapping his shoulder. "And you'll need to be fast. Very fast." The first wave of panic mixed with absurd exhilaration hit him like a lightning bolt. He realized, with dawning horror and reluctant thrill, that this mission was unlike any he'd faced before. Danger was one thing, but trying to perform the mysterious, teasing, possibly intimate rituals of a mischievous, gorgeous alien? That was something entirely new, and completely out of his league. And yet, somewhere deep inside, despite the embarrassment, the confusion, and the sheer ridiculousness of the situation, a spark of excitement grew. Maybe, just maybe, he could survive this. Or at least survive her laughter. By the time he stood still long enough to try and formulate a plan, she was gone again, leaving only the gentle ripple of the glowing pool behind and the faint echo of a teasing giggle that promised trouble, chaos, and far more than he had ever expected from a simple extraction mission. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart, and reminded himself that this was a mission. A mission with protocols, safety measures, and a clear objective. Extraction. Nothing more. Nothing less. And yet, the moment he stepped forward onto the glowing platform, she appeared in front of him again, hovering just out of reach, arms crossed, smirking like she already knew every thought racing through his mind. "First," she said lightly, tilting her head, "we must prepare." She floated toward a series of strange floating symbols that glimmered in the air. "Preparation is key. Every motion precise. Every breath intentional," she demonstrated, waving her arms in sweeping arcs and tapping the symbols in an intricate rhythm. The patterns lit up with soft pulses of color, responding to her touch. He tried to follow, mimicking her gestures, but his movements were clumsy and stiff. He waved a hand too high, missed a symbol entirely, and nearly tripped over an iridescent vine curling across the platform. She giggled, and he froze, cheeks flushing. "You must be more fluid," she teased, floating above him. "Like water. Like light. Not like whatever that was." She flicked her fingers, and a wave of soft light nudged him gently, making him stumble backward again. He cursed under his breath, muttering something about the unfairness of alien grace. "Focus," she said, eyes glinting with mischief. "Focus and breathe." She dipped her hand into the glowing pool, sending ripples toward him, and he jumped back instinctively, slipping on the wet surface. His boots skidded as he flailed for balance, arms spinning like windmills. The alien simply floated there, clapping her hands lightly and laughing. "You're hopelessly human," she said, amusement dancing in her eyes. "But endearing." He opened his mouth to argue, then realized he had absolutely no comeback. Instead, he attempted to mimic her gestures again, more cautiously this time. Unfortunately, his cautious attempt turned into a complete disaster. He accidentally knocked over one of the glowing symbols, which tumbled through the air and landed in the pool with a splash, sending ripples that lit up the room like fireworks. She squealed with laughter, not mocking cruelly, but clearly delighted by the chaos he caused. He groaned. I'm trying. That's obvious, she said, still giggling. But trying isn't enough. Precision is everything. And posture. She gestured toward a floating platform that seemed to shift beneath his feet. Balance. Coordination. Sensitivity. He looked down, already regretting it. The platform wobbled under his weight, tilting slightly. He stumbled, arms flailing again, and for a horrifying moment he felt himself slipping off the edge. In a flash, she reached out, her hand brushing his shoulder ever so lightly, steadying him, but not before he fell forward onto his hands, nearly colliding with the pool. His face flushed red as she floated above him, laughing, the soft ripple of her amusement echoing around the chamber. Delicate, she said, voice playful. Like handling a rare crystal. You must be careful. He straightened, trying to act professional, adjusting his uniform, though his hands were trembling. I can handle delicate, he said, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. You can try, she said, twirling lightly in the air. Then, without warning, she vanished. He spun around, panicked, trying to locate her, only for her to reappear above him, dripping glowing liquid from the pool onto the platform, narrowly missing him. He leapt back, flailing wildly, splashing himself in the process. The alien's laughter rang out again, a musical echo that made his stomach twist with a mix of frustration, embarrassment, and something else he didn't quite want to name. This ritual, he began cautiously. It doesn't really require. Ship, she interrupted, placing a finger to his lips, then instantly vanishing, leaving only the faint shimmer of her afterimage. He froze, unsure if he'd been touched or imagined it, heart pounding, palms slick from the glowing liquid. Come now, a voice echoed from somewhere in the chamber. We have much to do. Before he could respond, the floor beneath him shifted, sending him sliding forward in a panic. He barely managed to grab onto one of the floating platforms, swinging like a pendulum before crashing into a glowing console. Sparks flew harmlessly, but his embarrassment reached peak levels as the alien reappeared just beyond his reach, laughing so hard she seemed to hover slightly sideways in the air. You're hopeless, she said, still giggling. And yet, fascinating. She reached out, teasingly brushing his shoulder again before vanishing once more. The pattern was maddening. Each disappearance, each sudden appearance, sent him into a flurry of panic, yet somewhere beneath it, a thrill coursed through him. He attempted to mimic her gestures again, more carefully this time. The first few motions went well, a small success. But then, she flicked her hand in a sudden swirl, and he found himself tumbling headfirst into the glowing pool. The water was warm, luminous, and entirely alien in sensation. He sputtered and flailed, arms flailing to keep his balance, while she hovered above, applauding lightly, a teasing grin on her radiant face. You're learning, she said. Slowly but learning. He coughed, sputtered, and muttered something that sounded like a half-hearted apology. Yes, slowly. Very slowly. Her laughter was the only response, wrapping around him like an electric current, teasing him in ways he could not ignore. Every clumsy movement, every misstep, every accidental touch of her glowing form drove him further into panic and fascination simultaneously. The ritual, he realized with a mix of dread and excitement, was far more than extraction. It was a test. A teasing, maddeningly delightful test, and he was hopelessly, comically unprepared. Even as he struggled to regain his balance, to follow her strange instructions, and to keep up with her mischievous maneuvers, he felt a spark of something unfamiliar. Somewhere beneath the embarrassment, the chaos, and the awkward physical comedy, a thrill took root. The alien's teasing wasn't just for fun, it was drawing him in, challenging him, and somehow making him feel alive in a way he had never felt before. By the time he hauled himself out of the pool, drenched and glowing faintly from the bioluminescent water, he realized that this ritual was going to test everything about him, his patience, his composure, and his capacity to survive an alien's mischievous charm. And yet, a tiny part of him, buried beneath panic and embarrassment, looked forward to the next challenge. He wiped the glowing liquid from his face, trying to regain some semblance of dignity, though he knew it was hopeless. The alien floated in front of him, eyes gleaming with mischief, her every movement fluid and mesmerizing. She tilted her head slightly, studying him with the kind of patience reserved for someone who already knew he was completely unprepared, and thoroughly entertaining. "No," she said softly, almost conspiratorially. "The next part requires more sensitivity." He swallowed hard, heart hammering in his chest. Sensitivity. That could mean anything. He nodded vigorously, trying to appear confident, though his hands trembled slightly. The moment he moved, she flicked her wrist, and a ripple of light shot across the chamber, lifting him slightly off the platform and spinning him slowly in the air. He flailed, arms pumping, trying to maintain balance, but instead slammed into a floating console. Sparks flew harmlessly, yet his ears burned with embarrassment. She giggled at his predicament, clearly delighted. "You're hopelessly human," she said, hovering closer. "But fascinating." Her hand brushed his shoulder lightly, and for a moment he froze, heart leaping in a way that had nothing to do with fear. She pulled back just as quickly, vanishing for an instant before appearing behind him, whispering in a voice that made him tense. "Patience is key." He turned to face her, trying to collect himself, but the platform beneath him shifted again, wobbling precariously. He stumbled, catching himself only by gripping one of the glowing rails, his entire body vibrating with tension. The alien watched silently, arms folded, an amused smirk playing across her lips. "You must learn to move like water," she said softly, floating above him, then suddenly disappeared. He spun around, trying to find her, only to trip on a vine-like structure that wrapped around his ankle. He yelped and tumbled forward, landing with a wet splash in the pool. The liquid glowed beneath him, and he sputtered, coughing, drenched from head to toe. She floated above him, laughter ringing melodiously through the chamber. "Better," she said lightly. "But still clumsy. Much too human." He scrambled out, dripping and blinking, trying to regain his composure. Every time he caught his breath, she would flick her wrist or disappear, sending him into a panic of trying to keep up. It was exhausting and exhilarating all at once. His muscles ached, his uniform was ruined, but he couldn't deny the thrill coursing through him every time she appeared unexpectedly, teasing him mercilessly. "Follow me," she said, her voice softer now, more intimate. She floated ahead, gliding effortlessly between platforms that tilted and shimmered, and he hurried to follow, careful not to lose balance. He almost succeeded until she flicked a tendril of glowing liquid in his direction, and he slipped again, landing on his hands and knees with a wet slap. She laughed, floating down to hover just above him, her hair brushing his face as she leaned forward teasingly. "You're learning," she said, voice low, playful. "Very slowly. But you're learning." He swallowed, chest tight. I'm trying," he stammered, and she tilted her head, smiling as if amused by both his words and his tone. Her hand brushed his back lightly, and his entire body stiffened, caught between panic and something else he couldn't quite name. The line between instruction and teasing blurred, leaving him flustered in ways that were both maddening and exhilarating. As they continued through the ritual, the challenges grew more complex. She had him balance on precarious platforms, replicate fluid gestures she demonstrated effortlessly, and even mimic strange alien signals with his hands and voice. Each misstep sent him into flailing panic. Each successful movement earned a delighted laugh or a teasing remark. The physical closeness, combined with her mischievous attention, made his heart race in ways he had never experienced. At one point, she disappeared completely, leaving him suspended on a wobbly platform above the glowing pool. He panicked, teetering dangerously, only for her to reappear behind him, lightly touching his shoulder. The contact sent a jolt through him, his mind spinning. He flinched backward, trying to maintain balance, but his foot slipped. In a flash, he tumbled, landing against her by accident. Their eyes met, and for a split second, everything stopped, the chaos, the laughter, the glowing light, and it was just the two of them. She laughed softly, brushing his arm gently. "Careful," she teased, "or you might actually succeed at bonding before the ritual is complete." He blinked, cheeks burning, fumbling for words. I wasn't trying. Of course you weren't, she interrupted, a smirk playing on her lips. But perhaps you are, human enough to keep it interesting. She hovered back, letting him catch his breath, but the teasing gleam in her eyes told him she wasn't done pushing. The remainder of the ritual was a blur of flailing, accidental closeness, and slapstick chaos. He slipped, she disappeared and reappeared in unexpected locations, and each mishap created a mixture of laughter, blushes, and heart-pounding tension. At one point, he accidentally brushed her hand while trying to catch his balance, and her soft gasp made him freeze in place, unsure whether to apologize or run. "You're improving," she said, voice low, amused. "Perhaps, by the end, you'll even manage to follow instructions without falling into the pool." He groaned, realizing the challenge was less about physical dexterity and more about surviving her playful torment. And yet, beneath all the chaos, beneath the embarrassment and panic, he felt a strange warmth. Something in her laughter, her teasing, and her surprisingly gentle touches stirred something in him he hadn't anticipated. He was starting to enjoy it, her company, the absurdity of the ritual, and even the way his heart raced at her slightest attention. By the time the last exercise ended, he was drenched, exhausted, and completely flustered, but he caught a glimpse of her smile, warm, playful, undeniably affectionate. Despite the ridiculousness of the situation, despite every slip and stumble, he realized he had survived, learned something, and perhaps bonded in ways the ritual hadn't explicitly required. He staggered onto the final platform, soaked, exhausted, and entirely aware that every muscle in his body was trembling, not from fear, but from sheer, unrelenting chaos. The alien floated before him, radiant and teasing as ever, her eyes sparkling with a mixture of pride and mischief. She tilted her head slightly, as if studying him, and he instantly felt small, exposed, and utterly human. "This is it," she said softly, voice like liquid light. "The final step." He gulped, heart hammering, trying to steady himself, though he knew the moment he moved she could vanish or flick some glowing liquid at him just to watch him flail. "Final step," he repeated, as if saying it aloud might somehow prepare him. I'm ready." "Good," she said, her lips curling into a teasing smile. "Let's see if you've truly learned anything." The floor shifted beneath him, tilting at a dangerous angle. He scrambled to regain his balance, waving his arms frantically. She floated lightly above, arms crossed, giggling at his predicament. Then, with a flick of her wrist, she caused a set of platforms to rise and fall in a rhythm that made every step precarious. He jumped, slipped, slid, and nearly collided with her, his face bright red, his nerves stretched taut. She laughed, a sound so intoxicating that even in the midst of panic, he felt a strange thrill. "Careful!" she called, floating just out of reach. "Or you'll ruin everything." He tried to mimic her gestures, trying to follow her every motion, but each step seemed to create a new disaster. A glowing tendril wrapped around his ankle, another platform tipped under his weight, and he flailed, arms wildly, almost toppling into the pool again. She appeared beside him, brushing his arm lightly as he stumbled, and his body stiffened with a jolt of heat he couldn't hide. "You're improving," she said softly, smirking. "But barely." He groaned, trying to regain his composure, muttering something about never being prepared for alien rituals. Her laughter rang out again, melodious, teasing, echoing off the chamber walls. He swallowed hard, trying not to think about the way her hand lingered near his shoulder, the way her presence made him hyper-aware of every movement. Then came the final motion. She gestured to a glowing symbol that hovered in the air. "This is it. One precise movement, one perfect step, and the extraction will succeed." He stared at the symbol, sweat dripping down his face, heart hammering like a drum. He could feel the tension in his muscles, the rapid thumping of his pulse, and the weight of the entire ritual pressing down on him. With trembling hands he stepped forward, trying to mirror her movements perfectly. He nearly tripped again, but somehow managed to steady himself, and for a fleeting moment, everything aligned. The symbol glowed brighter, the platforms shifted in harmony, and he felt the alien's approving gaze on him. Almost, she whispered, floating closer. Just one more step. He exhaled, preparing for the final motion, and in his nervousness, he overcompensated, stumbling forward and colliding lightly with her. His face went crimson. Her laughter rang out, warm and musical, but this time it wasn't mocking. She brushed her hand against his chest, steadying him, and he froze, heart hammering in ways he had never expected. You did it, she said softly, eyes twinkling. Despite your chaotic methods, you succeeded. He blinked, barely comprehending. I did. Yes, she said, a playful grin spreading across her face. And I must admit, your approach was very entertaining. She leaned forward slightly, and he felt the warmth of her presence wrap around him like a gentle current. More than entertaining, even. Brave. Humanly brave. He swallowed, cheeks burning, unsure whether to feel proud or mortified. She extended a hand, her fingers brushing his lightly. Now, the extraction. With a soft flick, the platform beneath them shimmered, and in a wave of glowing light, they were enveloped in a bubble of energy. The world around him blurred, a sensation of floating, spinning, and rushing through color and light unlike anything he had ever experienced. He gripped onto the nearest surface instinctively, and the alien's laughter, gentle and musical, echoed in his mind, calming and teasing all at once. When the light faded, they were on solid ground again, mission complete. He blinked, breathing heavily, soaked and still trembling from the exertion, but safe. The alien hovered beside him, radiant as ever, her expression softening. She tilted her head, eyes gleaming. You survived, she said simply, a hint of pride in her voice. And you managed to bond along the way. He chuckled nervously, trying to ignore the lingering warmth from their accidental closeness during the ritual. Bonded? I guess that's one way to put it, he muttered, glancing at her. She laughed softly, a sound that made his chest tighten pleasantly. Perhaps, she said, floating closer. Next time, you'll be quicker, more graceful. I'll try, he said, still unsure whether he meant it for her or for himself. She smiled, radiant and teasing, and reached out, brushing his shoulder lightly. The contact sent another spark through him, this time less chaotic and more intimate. He realized then, fully, that despite the ridiculous mishaps, the near-constant embarrassment, and the overwhelming chaos of the ritual, he had formed a genuine connection. Until next mission? She teased, hovering slightly higher, eyes alight with playful promise. He nodded, still catching his breath, and laughed awkwardly, feeling a surge of exhilaration he had never felt on any extraction mission before. Until next mission, he echoed, a grin breaking across his face despite the wet uniform and bruised ego. As they turned to leave the chamber, the alien flicked a glance back at him, eyes sparkling with mischief. Next time, human, she said softly, try not to embarrass yourself quite so much. He laughed again, chest tight, heart pounding, and realized that he wouldn't mind it one bit if she kept challenging him, teasing him, and making him feel alive in ways no mission, no matter how dangerous, ever could.